Breaking news from around your world on this Friday, July 26th, 2019. I'm Larry Rice. The United Nations said more than 100 people, including 26 children, were killed in airstrikes on hospitals, schools, markets, and bakeries in northwest Syria in the past 10 days. UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet blamed the attacks in rebel-held areas on the government and its allies and said the attacks were met with apparent international indifference. Syria and its ally Russia have both denied targeting civilians in airstrikes in the Idlib region. Speaking to reporters, Bachelet criticized the failure of leadership by the world's most powerful nations and said the rising death toll in Idlib has been met with a collective shrug and the conflict has fallen off the international radar while the UN Security Council was paralyzed. She said the civilian targets were unlikely to have been accidental and warned that those carrying out the attacks could be charged with war crimes. Idlib province, along with the north of Hama province and western Aleppo province, is one of the last opposition strongholds in Syria after 8 years of civil war. 16 U.S. Marines were arrested Thursday at their Southern California base on suspicion of smuggling undocumented migrants near the U.S.-Mexico border, along with drug-related offenses. None of the Marines arrested Thursday at Camp Pendleton were involved in border support. The Marine Corps said in a statement that the arrest stemmed from information gathered in a human smuggling case from earlier this month. On July 3rd, 2 Marines were detained for allegedly picking up and transporting 3 Mexican nationals for money after the migrants had been dropped off at a point arranged by cell phone. 8 other Marines were being questioned about possible drug crimes in a separate investigation. North Korea said Friday that its launch of 2 short-range missiles on Thursday was meant as a solemn warning to South Korea to stop building up its arsenal and conducting joint military drills with its allies. Pyongyang referred to South Korean leaders as warmongers. According to North Korea's state-run news agency, leader Kim Jong-un said, "We cannot but develop nonstop super-powerful weapon systems to remove the potential and direct threats to the security of our country that exist in the South." Analysts said the message was also meant for the United States, which is trying to restart stalled negotiations on curbing North Korea's nuclear program. Thursday's launch was the first since Kim and President Donald Trump met last month and agreed to start fresh talks. The House on Thursday passed a $2.7 trillion bipartisan budget deal that would increase military and domestic spending while raising the debt ceiling by $320 billion for 2 years. Despite President Trump's support for the agreement, many Republicans made it clear they were unhappy the bill lacked spending cuts they wanted. Still, the bill passed 284 to 149, with 65 Republicans joining the Democratic majority and 132 Republicans voting against it. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin led negotiations on the deal, which now goes to the Senate, where it is expected to pass. It will then go to President Trump's desk, and he said he will sign it. The Senate Intelligence Committee on Thursday unveiled a report warning that Russian election interference in the 2016 election was broader than previously believed. The report described extensive activity directed by the Russian government to exploit weaknesses in the U.S. election system and warned that the U.S. must create effective deterrence to prevent further cybersecurity issues. The report said Russia targeted election systems in all 50 states, although there was no evidence that any votes were changed. Lawmakers applauded progress on preventing such foreign meddling over the last 3 years, but the committee's vice chairman, Senator Mark Warner of Virginia, said he hoped the findings would fuel a stepped-up effort to improve election security. He said this threat remains urgent. The Democrat-controlled House Oversight Committee voted along party lines Thursday to authorize a subpoena for White House work emails and texts exchanged on personal accounts. The committee's chair, Representative Elijah Cummings of Maryland, said there was evidence that several White House officials had violated the Presidential Records Act by using private accounts and failing to preserve their messages. He said, "What we do not yet know is why these White House officials were attempting to conceal these communications." The subpoena specifically names acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, but it also could target messages to and from President Trump's daughter Ivanka and his son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner, who have acknowledged using personal accounts for work. The federal government said it will pay American farmers between $15 and $150 per acre under a $16 billion aid package for those hurt by the U.S. trade war with China. The payouts, designed to focus on small farmers, are intended to make up for lower prices and lost sales. The latest bailout follows a $12 billion aid package last year. Farmers have been among the hardest hit in President Trump's trade war with Beijing. Shipments of soybeans to China, the number one buyer, fell to a 16-year low in 2018. Democrats objected to the plan, saying farmers need fair trade practices, not a bailout. 4 major automakers on Thursday announced they had reached a deal with the state of California on fuel efficiency rules. The agreement, which comes as the Trump administration tries to prevent states from setting their own standards to fight climate change, calls for the automakers to make vehicles with an average efficiency of 51 miles per gallon by 2026, looser than the Obama administration's target of 54 miles per gallon, but tougher than the Trump administration's proposal to roll back the standard to 37 miles per gallon. In a joint statement, Ford, BMW, Volkswagen, and Honda said, "Ensuring that America's vehicles are efficient, safe, and affordable is a priority for us all." U.S. regulators are approving T-Mobile's $26.5 billion takeover of rival Sprint, despite fears of higher prices and job cuts. Friday's approval by the Justice Department and 5 state attorneys general comes after Sprint and T-Mobile agreed to conditions that would set up satellite TV provider Dish as a 4th wireless company, so the number of major U.S. providers remains at 4. Dish is buying prepaid cell phone brands such as Boost and Virgin Mobile and some bandwidth or airwaves for wireless service from the two companies. It will also be able to rent T-Mobile's network for 7 years while it builds its own. Sprint and T-Mobile combined would now approach the size of Verizon and AT&T. The companies have argued that bulking up will mean a better next-generation 5G wireless network that they could make on their own. A judge must also approve the Justice Department settlement. SpaceX successfully launched its 18th cargo flight to the International Space Station from Cape Canaveral Air Force Station Thursday evening. The Dragon spacecraft is headed to deliver supplies, science equipment, and a new docking mechanism that will be used for spacecraft carrying people. The reusable booster for the rocket landed at the Air Force Station after the launch, causing sonic booms on the Space Coast and over parts of Central Florida. It's the 3rd time SpaceX has launched this particular cargo spacecraft, and the 2nd time the booster was used. NASA astronaut Nick Hague, who is on board the space station, is set to retrieve the spacecraft during the docking maneuver this weekend. Among the private companies sending 17 research projects to the space station are Goodyear, Nickelodeon, drug maker AstraZeneca, and Enscript, an Orlando company that is sending a 3D printer into space to make human tissue. And that's your update for this Friday, July 26th, 2019. I'm Larry Rice. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend.